Hansen had let his Aqua Reaper live with Ningyu because he wanted to gather the secrets of the Ning family from Ningyu. But Ningyu was aware of the abilities possessed by an Aqua Reaper, so he was able to control its behavior and mind and limited the amount of intelligence it provided Hansen. Usually, Ningyu was alone and unwilling to see anyone. He would just wait. When he had nothing to do, he would just remain by himself and read Buddha books for about 10 hours straight. It seemed as if he was extremely focused on learning Buddhism and Tao. He did not rush about and he was not nervous, so Hansen could learn nothing. If Son of Heaven was half as good as Ningyu, I would most likely have died at Steel Armor Shelter. Hansen was now lamenting the past, and in his heart, the dread he felt about Ningyu was increasing. Luckily, however, Ningyu had been made host to a parasite by the Aqua Reaper. If he hadn't been, Hansen would be extremely nervous. Hansen then remembered something that Son of Heaven used to say, in regards to if Hansen had come too late, he couldn't become his enemy. In the past, Son of Heaven was a proud person. Now Hansen wondered how Son of Heaven would treat him if they met again. Would he be considered a friend or a foe? Hansen was intrigued and wanted to find out, but his purpose there was to buy a sword. Beyond that, he didn't want to see Son of Heaven or get himself into any sort of trouble. Surprisingly, the road to the demon's shelter had been a relatively smooth one. Entering the demon's shelter, Hansen parted ways with the merchant group. He looked around, trying to locate shops that traded in the beast souls he was searching for. It truly was a royal shelter, as stores that sold beast souls were everywhere and there were even certain streets dedicated to the trade. Other shops even offered 1 or 2 sacred blood beast souls as a premium product to go along with their primary wares. Hansen had only to browse 4 shops before he found a sacred blood beast soul. Unfortunately for him, it was a great sword, which rendered it unsuitable for his dual skill. To find the sword-type beast soul he was looking for, Hansen made sure to peruse the offers of every beast soul shop he could enter. Eventually, he came to a shop called Precious Beasts, and he found that it hosted a sword to which he immediately took a liking. Unfortunately, it wasn't a proper product, and so the owner of the store presented Hansen with a beast soul booklet. It was a colored one provided by the Alliance. There was plenty of information on the sword he was wanting, and the booklet even illustrated the monster it had dropped from. It was a purple copper ancient sword, and its body was red and purple. It looked rather delicate, and the blade was engraved with numerous mystical carvings. It was quite beautiful, with nothing menacing about its appearance. The sword in its entirety was about 4 feet in length. The sword was longer than the Silver Eye Snake King Beast Soul Sword, and slightly wider too. Their appearances were almost polar opposites, as the purple copper ancient sword looked quite righteous against the malevolent-looking Snake King sword. Taking everything about its appearance into account, Hansen deemed it suitable for his dual skill. This was initially a skill that required 2 people to cast, but Hansen had modified and morphed it into one that could be used by himself. This was perfect for his right hand, whereas the other was perfect for his left. Having the righteous and the wicked working together would maximize the efficiency of the dual sword skill. The booklet stated that the purple copper ancient sword came from a mascot beast. Its appearance was not unlike a copper-maned lion, plated with purple scales. Its face was one of portent and mystique, and its formal name was Ancient Mascot Beast. "Boss, what are you selling this ancient sword beast soul for?" Hansen pointed at the mascot beast in the booklet. "I apologize, but this is a premium product of the store. For this, we can only trade." The owner had a soft-sounding voice, but the hint of a boast sugared his words. The ancient sword beast soul had had numerous prospective buyers, but the owner had never received a satisfactory offer. It was believed that the owner deliberately turned down each offer to leave the purple copper ancient sword there in the store in order to attract potential customers. However misleading this was, it worked, and patrons flocked to the store due to the sight of the sword, made it comparable to a number of bigger stores in the shelter. The owner hence viewed the mascot beast soul as a lucky charm and did not relish selling it. What would it take to trade it with you? The owner said that he wanted to trade a beast soul for a beast soul, which matched Hansen's initial idea. The then owner frowned and looked at Hansen, saying, "For my sword, I could only accept a berserk sacred blood beast soul in exchange. Also, it would have to be a sword-type beast soul. What about other types of berserk sacred blood beast souls?" Hansen eyed the owner curiously. "No." The owner shut down the counter offer immediately. Hansen caught on to the fact that owner had no real intention of selling the sword. If someone did indeed possess a berserk sacred blood beast soul sword, who in their right mind would swap it for an ordinary sacred blood beast soul sword? Such a transaction would not be remotely fair. "Brother, you are saying that you want to trade a berserk sacred blood beast soul for this sword?" A curious man had overheard Han Sen's offer. Yes, but the owner isn't willing to make the trade, Han Sen said with a hopeless sigh. What kind of berserk sacred blood beast soul are we talking about here? If it is suitable, I have a sacred blood beast soul, the man said. Is it a sacred blood beast soul sword? It is a sword I require, Han Sen said. Yes, the man replied quickly. He then summoned an icy-looking steel sword. Unfortunately for Han Sen, it was a great sword. Its body was wide and its length exceeded 5 feet. It wasn't the sort that Han Sen was looking for. What is your beast soul? Summon it and let me take a look, the man suggested. Han Sen squinted his eyes. Although he did not plan to make a trade for the great sword, he still summoned the inferno bull that infused his body. Han Sen transformed into a black bull with great wings and giant horns protruding from his head. The mouths of the man and the owner both sat agape. Oh my days, a berserk sacred blood transfigured beast soul that flies. You truly want to trade this magnificent thing for a sword? The man said, his eyes wide. Yes, that is my desire. Han Sen took away the beast soul and returned to his true form. I will trade with you. The man immediately cried. Hey mister, this is my shop. If you want to trade or do business with this man, I must politely ask you to leave. You can talk with him once he's also left the building. The owner ran from behind the counter and stepped between the man and Han Sen with a mean, scowling face. You said you didn't want to trade. I did not disturb your business, the man countered. Who said I wasn't willing to trade? The owner's face was red, and he had to force himself to speak. He ignored the man and turned to smile at Han Sen. Mister, did you not wish to trade your beast soul for my purple copper ancient sword? I will trade it with you. Yes, I will. I'll do it right now. After thinking it over, I've realized that the offer is skewed heavily in your advantage. This is a tremendous berserk sacred blood beast soul. After all, Han Sen smiled. Friend, do not listen to him. I'll throw in an extra mutant beast soul to go with the great sword, the man now offered. When Han Sen left the beast soul shop, he walked out with his desired purple copper ancient sword and an additional armored sacred blood beast soul. They were both top of their kind in the Sacred Blood League. The ancient sword in particular. It was the best sacred blood sword a person could get, and being able to swap the Berserk Inferno Bull for both of these was absolutely worth it. Han Sen was more than happy with the deal. Han Sen had even expected to make a loss when visiting these shops for a decent sword, having not expected to make such a decent trade. Friend, how about we go and have dinner together? It would allow us to get to know each other. After he had left the shop, the curious man from earlier caught up with Han Sen and invited him out. The man's name was Zhang Xiang, and he said he was the organizer of an arena designed for the combat of pets and spirits. He gave Han Sen his contact details, telling him that if he ever had a pet or spirit he fancied putting in the arena for battle, all he had to do was call. You sell tickets? Han Sen asked, confused. Zhang Xiang smiled and said, sort of, but we mainly trade in the physical transaction of pets and spirits, with some gambling on the side. Han Sen's curiosity was piqued as Zhang Xiang sold the idea. As little as he made it sound, however, Han Sen knew it was the side gambling that made the big money. If you have the time, you can come with me to play. There is a challenge arena, and if your pet or beast soul can overcome the trials, you'll get a lot of money and fame. Any fights following that will only increase the money you could make, Zhang Xiang said. Han Sen was interested. He wanted to take a look at the second shelter's range of pets and spirits and learn what level they might be at. He knew he wouldn't be lacking in spirits in the future, but if he wanted to sell them for a hefty price, he'd have to establish a relationship with this place first. Zhang Xiang brought Han Sen to his arena. It was much bigger than he had expected. It was quite shocking that the little arena Zhang Xiang was referring to was actually the arena for the entire demon shelter. It could easily seat 100,000 people. The arena was split into several different battlegrounds, with each hosting a number of assorted pets and spirits battling it out. They were mostly pets, though, with few spirits fighting at all. Even at this time, however, there were around 10,000 people watching. Han Sen then caught sight of Son of Heaven, sitting in the rafters. There was a number of beautiful women around him, watching the biggest battleground of the arena in the middle. Inside, spirits were fighting. These spirits were the only spirits in the arena fighting. The rest were just pets. Han Sen took a look and noticed that both of the spirits were male. One was a giant cyclops, the other was a warrior clad in heavy armor. As impressive as they looked, they were only knight-class spirits. Why are there only knight-class spirits fighting? Aren't there any royal spirits? Han Sen casually inquired. You must be joking. Spirits are not that easy to come by. The higher class spirit it is, the harder it is to recognize the owner as well, Zhang Xiang explained. The whole arena has only ever had one royal spirit, and it has never found an opponent for it go up against. Our arena put down a substantial bounty in search of another royal spirit that could do battle with it in the arena, and the winner of such a fight would earn for themselves a free sacred blood beast soul. But we've still had not any takers. What kind of sacred blood beast soul are you offering? Han Sen was interested. For what reason would he decline a free sacred blood beast soul? Brother Han, are you suggesting that you have a royal spirit? Zhang Xiang's eyes sparkled. Yes, I have one, Han Sen said. What kind of spirit? Are you really looking to put yours to the test? Zhang Xiang looked at Han Sen excitedly. I would first have to see what manner of sacred blood beast soul I'd be getting, Han Sen said. It's a 4-winged thunderbird. It is a rare, flying and mountable beast soul. Hearing this, Han Sen quickly pulled out his beast soul booklet to take a look at what it was exactly. Brother Han, can I take a look at your royal spirit first? Zhang Xiang was rubbing his hands excitedly as he asked. Of course. Han Sen then summoned Snow Charmer. Zhang Xiang looked at the Snow Charmer and then his eyes almost popped out as he screamed, a royal female spirit. Han Sen frowned his eyebrows. Fortunately, they were in a private room. If they hadn't been, Zhang Xiang's grating scream would have drawn the attention of everyone. Brother Han, I knew from our first encounter that you are a very special person. I can't believe you have such a beautiful royal female spirit in your possession. It is so very precious. Are you ever going to sell it? Zhang Xiang was nearly leaping with excitement, his eyes not leaving the Snow Charmer for 1 second. It was as if she had frozen his gaze upon her. No, Han Sen had never thought spirits were suitable for trading as they were extremely intelligent. To him, it would be no better than human trafficking. Han Sen wasn't lacking in money either, so there was no reason for him to ever sell it. Zhang Xiang looked disappointed, but he still happily arranged the Snow Charmer's challenge with much excitement. Shortly after 2 other spirits had ended their battle, the host drummed up excitement by saying, "Our demon arena is heating up, as we're getting set to host a battle between 2 royal spirits. It has been a long time coming, but our royal spirit demon has finally received a challenger." From the audiences, noise and chatter quickly erupted. Another royal spirit actually showed up. Is it true? Another. I wonder what kind of spirit it will be. I hope it's a pretty woman. Man, that would be awesome. Look at the list of challengers. It's listed right there as Snow Charmer. That sounds like a woman to me. I'm not sure what she looks like exactly, but that doesn't sound like another ugly cyclops. Right? Just by hearing the name I know that it will be a beautiful female royal. Place your bets, people. Who do you think is going to win? Of course it will be the demon. Just hearing the name you can tell which of them is the strongest. After Son of Heaven, who was sitting in the rafters, heard the speech by the host, his eyes looked strange. He said to himself, a royal female spirit, well, I suppose it doesn't matter. It's impossible for it to beat my demon. The demon spirit belonged to Son of Heaven. The entire demon arena belonged to Son of Heaven as well. Yet the demon spirit did not come from the demon's shelter. It was something he had spent a great deal of money procuring. Its original name wasn't demon either. This was just a title Son of Heaven had bestowed upon it to match the arena. Son of Heaven wasn't worried that the demon spirit might lose, however. His demon was one of the top royal spirits one could possess, and he had equipped it with a few high-level beast souls. He refused to believe another spirit might ever possibly beat his own. But this was not just a fight between 2 spirits, it was a show of one's power and wealth. After all, spirits could make use of beast souls when they were provided them by the owner of the spirit. But Son of Heaven did not believe anyone had the talent to achieve victory over him. In the arena, the demon was already there. It was a 2-meter-tall warrior, plated in black armor and wielding a greatsword. It was no ordinary-looking greatsword, and it could very well have been a sacred blood one. When the demon entered the arena, it did so to the welcoming cheers of much applause. It was to be expected. After all, a battle of royal spirits was a supremely rare occurrence. When the Snow Charmer came out, the audience went crazy, screaming with excitement. It really is a female spirit. Wow, she is so beautiful. This royal spirit is far too pretty. Who is the owner of this spirit? He is a lucky man, indeed. Son of Heaven watched the Snow Charmer's reveal with focused eyes. Initially, he wasn't too concerned with the coming fight, and he hadn't even asked who his demon's opponent would be. But the Snow Charmer's appearance startled him, and so he sat up, captivated. In the beginning, before the arena, Son of Heaven wanted a beautiful spirit for himself, but there did not exist many in this world for him to claim. The likes of an actual lady spirit were even rarer. The appearance of his challenger was enthralling to see, and his eyes were wide in admiration. The fight began. Holding its great sword high, the demon roared and dashed towards the snow charmer. The snow charmer did not move, but her body shone with a red armor that was decorated in a variety of different glyphs. The icy cane she held in her hands became the ice blood lance she would use for battle. Then, a golden light hovered between her legs, and from it, what appeared to be a golden beast formed and raised the snow charmer upon its back. She had become a lancer of elegant doom. The snow charmer rode the golden roarer majestically, and their perfect synergy made them look like they were one. The speed at which she rode towards the demon enabled raging impact. The ice blood lance thrust into the demon, and the demon's greatsword slashed the snow charmer. The demon took a few steps back, but fortunately for it, the armor had not been pierced. The slash that the snow charmer received was fair, but under the protection provided to her from raging impact, she was not hurt. After the dust settled on their opening moves, it was too early to gauge who seemed likely to win. Son of Heaven's eyes gleamed with a certain fire. It was too soon for him to level up and gain access to the second shelter, so he had never seen a golden roarer before and was therefore unfamiliar with its talents and abilities. Son of Heaven was shocked to see the equipment that the snow charmer was loaded with. He knew that whoever owned that royal spirit was no ordinary person. Someone call for Zhang Xiang. Son of Heaven ordered for the people beside him to locate Zhang Xiang so he could inquire about who the snow charmer's owner was. He also wanted to know if there was any chance he could bargain for possession of her. Zhang Xiang quickly appeared in front of Son of Heaven and politely said, "Boss, is there anything you require? Who is the owner of that snow charmer?" Son of Heaven asked. Zhang Xiang hastily replied, "It is a young man of the name Han. He must have arrived here from another shelter. He is a reserved fellow, so I wasn't able to learn much about him." Han, Son of Heaven could not help but frown, as that surname brought up many unpleasant memories. It reminded him of a person he hated a lot. But Son of Heaven shrugged it off, believing the name was a coincidence and that the snow charmer would assuredly not belong to the Han Sen he used to know. That person was a late arrival to the second shelter, and he had only been there for less than a year. It would be impossible for him to acquire such spirits and beast souls in that amount of time. Wait until the battle is over, then bring him to me. Son of Heaven relayed this order to Zhang Xiang and did not say anything more. Although the snow charmer's performance was amazing, and the beast souls she owned were pretty remarkable, Son of Heaven still believed she was no match for his demon. He watched quietly. The clashes of the two spirits had pumped the audience into a frenzy of sheer excitement. The colliding of lance against sword, the trading of blows between a beautiful woman and a warrior, and the accompaniment of a terrifying mount rallied the crowd's enthusiasm to the max. "Demon, it is time for you to reveal your true strength." Son of Heaven observed that the mood of his audience was fever high. A creepy smile raised his lips. All of a sudden, the demon leapt out of the battleground and screamed as a light emanated from the partings in its plate armor. The body quickly morphed into that of a black ape built from metal, a sacred blood black steel ape. I had no idea that the demon had a sacred blood transfiguration beast soul. Someone recognized the demon's transfiguration beast soul and screamed aloud in mounting excitement. But this was not the extent of its abilities. The demon pointed its greatsword and summoned a yellow lion which had a horn on its head. After the lion appeared, it roared at the sky intimidatingly. A sacred blood pet golden horn lion. That is not fair. How is the snow charmer supposed to compete with that? 2 versus 1. And it's a sacred blood pet. Victory for the snow charmer is surely unobtainable now. He is too rich. He has too much money. But before the demon could start attacking, the snow charmer made a move of her own. Her body started to shine, and a really beautiful snow lady transfiguration beast soul appeared to combine with the snow charmer. From it, the snow charmer's hair turned white, her eyes gleamed silver, and her body was consumed with a biting frost. It is a humanoid transfiguration beast soul. It almost looks human now. Is the snow charmer's transfiguration a sacred blood type? While everyone was reeling from shock, the snow charmer raised her lance. A red-armored beast with 4 wings then spawned. It approached the golden horn lion. The two beasts collided with each other. One could not overcome the other, which resulted in a stalemate that rocked the audience to their cores. No one had expected the owner of the snow charmer to be so rich, almost as rich as the demon's owner himself. When Son of Heaven laid eyes on what was happening, he was just as rattled. It was normal to have armored beast souls raise a sacred blood pet, but that wasn't something ordinary elites could do. It must have had really strong power. Who is this person? Son of Heaven furrowed his brow once more. While Son of Heaven was still in shock, he saw the snow charmer raise her lance again. A flaming bird of fire soared through the sky, looking like a phoenix, raining fire down on the battlefield. It's an aura-type beast soul. How does that work? The look on Son of Heaven's face was bleak. An aura-type beast soul employed area of effect techniques best designed to go against groups of opponents. It was something sought after by numerous parties and shelters. He was in disbelief at the sight of an aura-type beast soul being used by a royal spirit. Even worse, the radius of the attack seemed significant, which might have suggested it was a sacred blood aura-type beast soul. The color drained from his face. Son of Heaven's assessment was incorrect, however. The range of a desert bird's aura was no different than the second shelter's sacred blood beast soul. The difference between the two was in power. Still, it was an intimidating attack and its efficiency was still quite remarkable. The demon had been totally restrained by the attack, and no matter what beast soul it had or at what quality, it could not overcome the snow charmer's bombardment. They were both royal spirits, yet the demon could not compete with her. Even without the desert bird, the double berserk armor and glyph would have proven too much for the demon to breach. The snow charmer paid no heed to the fruitless attacks of the demon and traded them for a significant blow to her opponent's weak point. In reaction to the critical hit, the demon fell backwards, screaming in agony. Son of Heaven couldn't stop his face from twisting and contorting as he viewed the battle. After a while, he ordered his demon to throw in the towel. Acknowledging his opponent's victory, he felt extremely depressed. If she killed the demon, every sacred blood beast soul he possessed would be gone. Even someone like Son of Heaven could not incur such a significant financial blow. Bring him to me. I want to see who this person is. Son of Heaven gritted his teeth. From what had just happened, he felt humiliated. Zhang Xiang quickly went in search of Han Sen and when he found him, said, "Mr. Han, the boss wants to see you." Zhang Xiang did not dare refer to Han Sen as brother anymore. The performance of the snow charmer had well and truly rattled him. He knew that Han Sen was an extraordinary character and could not possibly be any lower in status than Son of Heaven himself. He now felt the need to refer to him more appropriately. Son of Heaven. Han Sen looked at Zhang Xiang and quietly asked. Yes, Zhang Xiang replied. Han Sen then casually said, "If he wants to see me, then tell him to come down and meet me. I don't have the time or interest to go up there." After Son of Heaven heard what he had said, he suppressed the anger he felt in his heart and followed Zhang Xiang back down to Han Sen's room. The moment he pushed the door open and laid eyes upon Han Sen, he stiffened as if he had just suffered petrification. He just stood in the door frame and did not move. He could not believe that the snow charmer's owner was Han Sen. He could not believe that Han Sen, who had only just gained access to the second shelter, had already amassed such a fortune. How is this possible? Son of Heaven's face was a mixture of conflicting emotions. Zhang Xiang was standing behind Son of Heaven, looking at him with shock. He was used to seeing Son of Heaven as cocky and intimidating, but this was the first time he had ever seen him show restraint. Does he not dare to go inside fully? God, what happened? Who is that man named Han? He seems to have stricken fear into Son of Heaven himself. Zhang Xiang thought, looking upon Son of Heaven's face but misunderstanding him. Son of Heaven was not afraid of Han Sen. It was just that Ning's family avoided Han Jing and they had issued a decree stating no member of the Ning family could have any contact or conflict with Han Sen. So, when Son of Heaven saw Han Sen, he was crippled with shock and was unsure of what to do. He did not dare throw Han Sen out, but he knew that he couldn't be friends with him either. Didn't you want to see me? What are you standing there for? Aren't you going to say your bit? Han Sen looked at Son of Heaven with amused confusion. You, why have you come here? Son of Heaven wasn't exactly sure what to say. He had never bowed to anyone else before, and he wasn't used to showing modesty or courtesy. An unexpected meeting such as this made Son of Heaven uncomfortable, and it clashed with the way he generally presented himself to others. I heard there was a sacred blood beast soul up for grabs here at the arena, so I came to take it. Can I have the four-winged thunderbird now? Han Sen smiled wryly as he spoke. Son of Heaven's eyebrows jumped as he looked at Han Sen, and then said emotionlessly, Zhang Xiang, give him the four-winged thunderbird. Zhang Xiang had never seen Son of Heaven behave like this before. He was flabbergasted, but he nodded and then went to retrieve and deliver the four-winged thunderbird to its new, rightful owner. Ah, there it is. Well, I have what I came for. I should get going now. Perhaps I'll see you around. Han Sen took the beast's soul and prepared to leave. Son of Heaven's face looked quite ghastly, and he moved his lips as if to say something, but then stopped. Han Sen left the demon shelter almost immediately. Back in the Crystal Palace, Han Sen teleported to the Alliance. Now that he had both swords, he just needed to perfect the dual blade skill itself. And he wasn't particularly thrilled about Han Sen occupying the only high-class training room all the time, because that was the only room that had artificial gravity. To have gravity support, you had to visit the gravity chamber, but the things that you were able to do in such chambers were quite limited, and those places were too restrictive to train freely. For this, Annie was quite upset. When Annie arrived that day, she saw that the high-class training room was still in use. She bit her lip and went to the control room. She wanted to take a look at what Han-sen was doing in there. If he was training in there, then she'd let him be. But if he wasn't, she was determined to kick him out. As a guard of Jai Yanran, Annie had great authority. Quickly, she obtained the tape of footage from the training room and took a look. Training a sword skill. Annie saw Han-sen in the video training with 2 beast soul swords. Annie watched the tape for a while, and her demeanor changed. She cared little for his power or speed, but she was shocked when observing his skills. She noticed Han-sen's left hand was holding a thin, silver sword. The style was quite floaty, and each slash was reminiscent of some toxic snake leaping out of a cave to strike. His arm was swinging from a wild variety of angles, and it was impossible to guess where he would be thrusting or slashing next. In his right hand, he was holding a purple and copper sword, and the style was very free and wide. The power of each swing brought with it the force of a mountain. The beat and rhythm of each sword skill were different, and they didn't follow each other. If Annie saw these 2 skills being cast individually, she wouldn't think much of it. It was the fact that they were being cast in tandem, by the same person, that amazed her. Each hand rolled and waved with a different beat and a different rhythm, and it was hard to believe anyone could use both hands so effectively. It was like 2 people using a sword but in one. The more Annie watched, the more shocked she was. This was not any ordinary dual-blade sword skill, that was for sure. It had to be something completely different, one that employed both hands to do things separately. Very few evolvers in the Alliance could achieve something like this. It required more than talent to do something like this, as you needed a lot of focus to control both hands individually. If you lacked this, you would quickly become confused and lose all semblance of the skill. There were a few surpassers that had evolved in a way that gave them 2 personalities, so they could control each hand independently, and cast 2 sword skills at the same time. But amidst evolvers, such a thing was very rare. Annie really wanted to know whether or not he could use a dual-blade skill such as this in a proper fight. It would be quite terrifying to go up against someone who could. After thinking for a while, Annie left the control room and went towards Han-sen's training room. All of a sudden, the training room's door was open. A shadow rushed through with a sword in its hand and speedily approached Han-sen. He didn't even see the shadow's face before lifting his sword to block the incoming strike. Dong! The swords struck each other, and when the sparks cleared, Han-sen noticed it was Annie. "Annie, what are you doing?" Han-sen furrowed his eyebrows. Annie did not answer. Instead, she brought up her longsword and cast a skill. Although her move did not hit anything, it looked like a thunderbolt. It was quick enough to interrupt Han-sen's intention of continuing to talk, and it only gave him the time to try and block. It was too quick. Han-sen's sword wasn't enough to block Annie's attack, so he had to use 2. He managed, but it was no small feat, and he was sloppy in his execution. "Annie, are you looking to kill someone?" Han-sen managed to regather his composure and yelled his question. Although it was a question with a certain gravitas, Han-sen knew that if she truly wanted to kill him, he'd have been unable to dodge or block her previous strike. Annie remained silent, and she restarted her assault. Her method of combat was wide and quick, like the brief flashes of lightning. To evolvers, her speed was remarkably scary, and few would be able to withstand her attacks. Han-sen, however, was able to block every strike, and Annie could see for herself that he was using different sword skills without a single misstep. It was an exceptional choice. You can really do 2 things with one mind, can't you? You can cast 2 skills, 1 for each hand. Annie spoke with surprise, and her face looked strange. Han-sen was super happy to be able to repel Annie's attacks. Annie's sword skills were quick, even quicker than the twin spirit itself. This was a perfect opportunity for Han-sen to train against someone with fast skills. Annie was a surpasser, and although she lowered the speed of her attacks to go against Han-sen, she was still faster than any other evolver. Ordinary evolvers could never hope to dodge her frantic attacks. Annie merely wanted to give Han-sen a quick test, and after doing so, she was ready to leave. But Han-sen shouted and ran towards Annie with both swords drawn. "You come here, try to act cool and then just leave. I can't let you walk away so easily." Han-sen swung both of his swords in a bid to get Annie to stay. Annie was surprised at his behavior. She made a hum sound and stayed her exit. She brought up her longsword once again and ran towards Han-sen, deciding to beat him up before leaving. She didn't boost her sword speed from earlier but kept it at what it was instead. But even like that, it was both faster and stronger than Han-sen was capable of dealing with. Han-sen's dual sword skill was strange, but Annie still thought it wouldn't be difficult to beat him. Dong! Annie's sword struck Han-sen's silver sword in his left hand. She expected the strike to knock the sword away, so she could follow up with a couple more hits and push Han Sen to the brink of defeat and achieve the revenge she sought for the game Han Sen played upon her previously. But when the two swords collided, Han Sen's sword did not receive the impact how she predicted it would. In fact, she felt an unnerving strength encroach and push against her own sword. She felt as if she had hit nothing at all. This sword skill of yours is spooky. Annie's heart was wondering why her skill was unable to disarm Han Sen how she wanted it to. After a few more slashes, Annie was fairly sure that Han Sen's left hand was imbued with yin force. When her sword clashed with his, she felt his sword feed and drain most of her energy and power. Unless Annie was willing to amplify her powers beyond what any evolver could do, there would be no way she could knock the sword out of his hand. Then I'll just go for your right-hand sword. Annie switched her target and attempted to go after Han Sen's purple copper ancient sword. Dong! Annie's longsword met the ancient sword and immediately felt a horrible strength push back against her. Although the force was not as grievous as her true max potential, it was enough to prevent her from knocking the sword out of his hand. How can he possess such power? Annie was puzzled and distraught. Han Sen's dual skill was far from a combination of two separate sword skills. He was employing yin and yang, fusing the sword skill with yin-yang blast. The balance of yin and yang was helping each other, combining the skies and humans together. Although now it was just the first shape, and he obviously had not mastered yet, it was still a shock for Annie to witness this. The number of surprises she was receiving only kept growing and growing. Lightning now erupted from Annie's body and following her next attack, the thenar space on both of Han Sen's hands were cut. His swords were sent rocketing away, and the force made them both pierce and remain stuck in the metal walls of the room. Annie looked at Han Sen one last time. Then she turned around and walked away. Her tall and slender shadow left the training room. Annie returned to her room. She reclaimed the videotape she had watched earlier and sent it via a special communicator. At the same time, in the same office, a middle-aged man opened the videotape. After watching it, he closed his eyes and reclined in his seat. It seemed as if he was resting, but then he opened his eyes and looked at the video once more. One mind controlling two things. Is this really the heir of Han Jing? Is Han Jing's prediction going to turn out correct? The middle-aged man furrowed his eyebrows as he spoke to himself. The communicator on his table rang again. He looked at the number and smiled. He picked up the call and saw the image of a beautiful woman fill the screen. Yanran, where did you find the time to talk with your old man today? Shouldn't you be spending your free time with your boyfriend? The middle-aged man joked. Jai Yanran blushed and said, Dad, what are you talking about? You know I always care about you. I know my daughter cares about me, worry not. But recently, you have been spending less and less time communicating with me. If you do have the time, try and talk to your mother once in a while, as well. I know she can be mean, but she loves you and misses you dearly. The middle-aged man said. I know, father. I was just talking to mom, and yes, she kept complaining about me. Jai Yanran said. Right, wait until Han Sen has finished serving in the army before introducing him to your mother. You two aren't young anymore, and if there aren't any issues prohibiting it, you both should get married sometime. I am still waiting for my grandkids. Dad, you really want me to get married that much? Jai Yanran's face was red, but she was happy to know how accepting her father was. Are you saying that kid named Han isn't good enough for you? Fine, I'll get Annie to throw him into the Black Plague Star and get him chained up in some mine somewhere. He can dig there for the rest of his days while you go and find someone you like. The old man jested, with a cold face. Daughters always knew what their fathers thought, and Jai Yanran knew exactly what this middle-aged man was thinking, too. She laughed and said, Fine, quit your kidding about. When he's done serving the army, I'll bring him around so he can meet you and mother. If you aren't satisfied, I'll throw him into the Black Plague Star myself. You seem quite confident. It looks like my daughter really has been attracted by someone. To think that the daughter I have had for 20 years will be taken away. Dad, can we quit pretending? Let's talk like normal. After the call ended, the middle-aged man's smile soon faded away. He carefully perused the information Annie had sent him, along with the videotape. His fingers tapped the table as he read, and he didn't say a word until he was done. Han Jingjai, you cause much unrest even in death. After a break of silence, the old man sighed. He closed the information tab. I am afraid you have a problem. Young Manly wore a grave expression. And what problem would that be? Han Sen casually asked. Problems followed him wherever he went, so what was one more to the equation? It's the son, Dong Sen, Young Manly said, heavily. That man wouldn't idly sit back and watch you claim the Black God shelter, and your men are the ones who are listening to Dong lie. With his son there, it'll be difficult to maintain our hold on the Black God shelter, Young Manly said. I can't believe they have made us become his guardian. That Dong Lai got me good, and it's not like I can reject this responsibility, Han Sen said and smiled. You can smile at a time like this. Young Manly rolled her eyes, but there Han Sen was, smiling. Again, Han Sen smiled. Then he said, why shouldn't I smile and laugh? No matter how much he has planned, control of the shelter resides firmly on the feeble shoulders of his son. He might not have what it takes. And besides, there is protocol to follow. There is no way Dong Lai will be able to kick us out. Maybe you are right, but if those people don't listen to you and follow the son's command instead, what will you do? Young Manly thought Han Sen was being too naive. That's fine by me, but for as long as I am around, the Black God shelter will be too. If I am gone, then the shelter will be destroyed. It's as simple as that, Han Sen said, with a streak of cold in his tone. Still, he did sound calm. Mr. Han, I have admired your name for a long time. Today, I finally get to meet you. In the Black God shelter, a young man shook Han Sen's hand with awe-driven sincerity. Han Sen smiled and looked at Kai Ziyuan, a person who was young, handsome, and most certainly outgoing. He had a smile that could melt the collective hearts of the entire world. But in Kai Ziyuan's features, Han Sen could spy the shadow of Ning Yu. Still, Kai Ziyuan was much younger. Ning Yu's heart and mind operated in tandem, neither feeling differently from the other. Inner disputes concerning morals and other such things stem from the differences of ideals and favoring of people's hearts and minds. But it wasn't so with him. Kai Ziyuan was no different than the norm in this regard. In Han Sen's eyes, Kai Ziyuan was a little girl in his mother's clothing, applying too much makeup and trembling in her high heels. He was clearly attempting to come across as mature. Even though his appearance left much to be desired, he meant well. Perhaps he would make a name for himself in the future, but for now, he was clearly too young. Han Sen continued to observe Kai Ziyuan. He nodded but didn't care much for him and didn't consider him a threat or potential opponent. His opponent wasn't even in the general vicinity of Black God shelter. He wasn't anywhere across the ice fields, either. Big brother Han, I must have you take care of me in the future. I have only just arrived in the shelter, so could you provide me with some mutant flesh and beast souls? It would be most favorable if they were of the sacred blood variety, too. Kai Ziyuan presented himself as lowly, like an absolute newbie. Sure, no problem, Han Sen agreed. Kai Ziyuan was made immeasurably happy, and said in appreciation, then I will be sure to rely on you in the future. Father told me there is much I should learn from you. If it is okay with you, could you bring me along next time you go out to hunt creatures? Sure, Han Sen agreed. Despite Kai Ziyuan's apparent and continued respect for Han Sen, Young Manly couldn't help but feel a little paranoid of something sinister lurking beneath the newbie's exterior. I think we need to talk about the problem that is Kai Ziyuan. Young Manly approached Han Sen, who was getting ready to go out on a hunt. She made sure to block his passage. Fine, speak. Han Sen smiled, sat down, and looked at Young Manly. That Kai Ziyuan is dangerous. He is trying to please everyone around you, but he is something else. He is a slithering snake. Young Manly said her piece straight, hoping to talk some sense into Han Sen and get him to pay attention. I know, Han Sen nodded. If you know, why do you still conform to everything he asks? Young Manly looked him in the eye and said. Han Sen stopped to think for a second. Then he tilted his head and replied, Manly, have you ever owned a pet? I am talking about something serious here. Young Manly was starting to sound annoyed. Why am I not being serious? I'm just wondering, have you ever owned a pet? Han Sen smiled and asked. No. Young Manly couldn't be bothered, but still answered. I used to know a neighbor who owned a cat. It was a really big, good-looking panther. It had thick black fur and the neighbor really cherished it. He groomed the cat each and every day, fed it luxurious cat food, and provided it with a magnificent cat house. Han Sen smiled and then continued, whenever I walked past his house, I could look over and see the cat sunbathing in the yard like some lord, behaving like the master of the house. Whenever it was upset, it would chew up the shoes in the house, and whenever the master wasn't paying attention to it, the panther would tear up the books he was reading. Young Manly's face lit up, as if she had just realized something. Then she started looking at Han Sen with wondering eyes, as if she were in deep thought. I was curious, so I went to ask the neighbor why he spoiled the cat like that, Han Sen said. And what answer did you receive? Young Manly curiously asked. Han Sen sighed and said, well, the neighbor just rolled his eyes and said, don't you know it's only a cat? Its world is fairly small and as a master, I am its everything. In the reverse, from your point of view, it is only a cat. After he said that, Han Sen patted Young Manly's shoulder and said, you go do your thing. Our world does not belong here. Seeing Han Sen's shadow leave the room, Young Manly's emotions were in complicated knots. So, after all, he does not value Kai Ziyuan. and he does not prioritize the well-being of the ice fields or the black god shelter in his heart. Hansen had an idea. Although he couldn't command the silver fox to hunt, and his previous attempt to kill sacred blood creatures under the sea had failed, a new idea struck him. It's okay not to hunt. I just need to bring you to the spirit shelter. If I did that, wouldn't all the creatures start running off? That means I could reach the spirit hall with ease. The only thing I am not sure of is whether the spirits will run off as well. But if they did, I could pick up the spirit stones for free. I am such a genius. Hansen's face smiled like a radiant flower as he thought of how he might easily obtain numerous spirit stones with little to no trouble. Come, my cute little silver fox. I have cooked you a fish fillet. Would you like to try some? Hansen was still super happy. After his bright idea, he leapt into the sea and caught a fair number of fish to cook for the silver fox. Seeing the silver fox eat the fish fillet slowly, the way Hansen smiled hid his eyes beneath numerous layers of creases. He said, "Good boy. Good boy. Eat more and more. When you are full, let's get to work." They arrived in no time at all. The royal shelter was now standing before them, and numerous creatures were walking in and around its exterior. Hansen took another look at the silver fox in his hands and quietly whispered, "This is the moment of truth." Continuing to hold the silver fox in his arms, he resumed his run towards the royal shelter. Just as he had hoped, all the creatures ran away at his approach. Not a single creature attempted to bar his passage, quickly fleeing before he even got close. I am going to be rich. Hansen, upon entering the royal shelter, smirked at the absence of a single creature there. He wondered where they all might have gone, but then hastily ventured towards the spirit hall. He entered the spirit hall without any trouble, but much to his dismay, he saw that the twin spirit continued to stand firm where it should have been. It didn't run off as he had expected it to. Seeing the silver-haired lady and blonde-haired lady pick up their swords, Hansen summoned his beast soul armor and glyph. He then summoned his purple copper ancient sword and silver eye snake king sword. The twin spirit swords came upon Hansen like a hard rain. The silver sword and golden sword crossed each other, as if they were trying to trap him in a net of blades. But what surprised Hansen the most was the fact that their sword skills were accelerating more and more. They were getting faster and faster, with each hit being heavier and heavier. He felt as if he couldn't hold out much longer. The silver-haired lady dealt Hansen's shoulder a blow which drew blood. Fortunately, it was not in a critical spot and so the damage wasn't severe. Hansen knew that he had not perfected his dual blade skill yet, and that it still possessed a few flaws. But right now, there was nothing else he could do. He battled the twin spirit for half an hour, and after receiving a few more hits, managed to summon his wings and fly away. The twin spirit was unable to fly, and the other creatures of the shelter would not dare approach Hansen, for he still had the silver fox in his company. So they just watched Hansen fly away. "I'll be back," Hansen shouted at the twin spirit as he escaped to the skies. "You are such a heartless fox. I give you nice food every day, treating you as I would treat my very own son. You saw me get injured, didn't you? So, how come you didn't help me out, you white-eyed fox?" Hansen was gasping as he spoke to the silver fox. He thought that if he was injured by the twin spirit, the silver fox would be enraged enough to leap into the fray and protect its master. But all it did was stay perched on Hansen's shoulder, not moving an inch. The silver fox was behaving as if it didn't see or hear anything. It did, however, lick his wounds after the escape, like it did once before. Almost immediately after the silver fox's application of its saliva, the wounds cleared up. Hansen was frustrated, but he wasn't mad at the silver fox. Seeing it care for his injuries, he smiled at the silver fox and rubbed its head. But Hansen wasn't walking away empty-handed. No matter how often he practiced his dual skill, he had been unable to perfect it. It was designed to deal with the twin spirit especially, and if he hadn't been able to at least test it out with them, there was no real telling whether or not it could be perfected as the ideal skill to go against them. He had also discovered that he could run into royal shelters with no trouble at all. He could walk into this particular one and battle the twin spirit whenever he desired. If he came back here a few times, every now and then, he could finally master his dual skill and beat the twin spirit. Fine, if I can't get it right the first time, I'll be sure to get it right by the 10th. And if it's still not mastered by then, I'll go there 100 times. Today, Hansen was leaving the Black God shelter to go to the royal shelter and further train his dual skill with the twin spirit. This time, however, as Hansen was running across the ice fields, the silver fox raised its head in a peculiar manner. The hairs of its silver coat of fur stood on their ends and its drowsy eyes were perked and wide awake. The silver fox looked in the direction of a giant glacier not too far away from them. Hansen patted the alerted silver fox's head to calm it down, but he was aware of what it had been looking at. As he stroked the fox, Hansen started looking at the nearby glacier. "Come on out, friend," Hansen gently called out. From behind the glacier, Zui Quang, who was clad in all white clothing, emerged. His strong body was not something people were likely to forget, and his skin was transparent like ice. It was even more delicate than the skin of a woman. "Zui Quang," Hansen frowned as he looked at him. At the exchange event, he caught sight of Zui Quang, but he had assumed that he lacked the high profile his brother Zui Yang did. He didn't come on stage to give a speech, but nevertheless, Hansen remembered him. Zui Quang did not respond. He merely raised his fist and started running towards Hansen. He was over 10 meters away from Hansen, but in one step, he had already appeared in front of him. Hansen watched his crystal-like fist and observed the frosted aura that surrounded it. Hansen summoned the silver snake sword and brought it down on the incoming fist. Following the strike, Zui Quang's fist was not even bleeding. Hansen took a few steps back, his sword ringing from the mighty slash as if it had been brought down on rock. Zui Quang still did not say anything. His fists were like a blizzard, furiously thrashing towards Hansen. Every punch was loaded with the power to kill a man, and the ferocity at which they were coming was frightening to witness. Hansen was surprised and worried. Is everyone in the Zhu family a madman? If a person has a difference of opinion, why not talk about the issue? Staying silent, raising fists, and seeking to kill is barbaric. This guy is freaking insane. Hansen did not have the time to talk, but these thoughts raced through his heart. Zui Quang's fisting skills were too cruel. Even with Hansen's level of sword skills, he was being suppressed. He had to rely on his Dongsu Sutra to keep up with Zui Quang's pace. Zui Quang was a far better fighter than Zui Yang. Hansen was putting all his effort into the fight, but it was proving barely enough to keep him alive. After a blizzard passed through, Zui Quang fell back. The snowstorm disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Then, Zui Quang stood where he was and said, "You really are something. You are able to block my blizzard skill. Zui Quang, I hold nothing against you. What is this all about? I don't need a reason to kill anyone. If I want to kill, I will kill. It's that simple. You are strong enough to make me use ice skin. Ice skin isn't that great," Hansen spoke with a disdainful face. Zui Quang's eyes went cold. He laughed and slowly approached Hansen. With every step, the frosty aura around him increased. His skin crystallized even further, and the endless chill that encompassed him grew thicker. He was looking more and more like an iceman. Now they stood 3 meters apart. Hansen could already feel the cold air emanating from Zui Quang. Hansen was surprised, wondering why the ice skin that belonged to the Zhu family could emit frosted air whereas his couldn't. Zui Quang was getting closer and closer, and his entire image looked frozen. Hansen imagined every cell of his foe's being was now ice. He was like a veritable ice demon. But even though Hansen was in the process of learning the same ice skin, he was actually starting to feel cold. He felt as if there was frost building up inside him. In this world, few evolvers can open their gene locks. Today, you should relish that which the tapestry of fortune has bestowed upon you, the opportunity of death by my first tier of ice skin. Zui Quang's eyes were so cold as he spoke. When he resumed his punching, it felt as if the air itself was going to solidify. Hansen tried to take a step back, but the fist was too quick and he was unable to dodge it effectively. So, he used his mascot beast sword to fight back. Dong! The fist collided with the sword, and a horrible force of icy power burst forth from Zui Quang's fist. Within a moment, the mascot beast sword was wholly consumed by ice, and as if it was a living parasite or infection, it frantically weaved a course down the sword to Hansen himself. Hansen's fingers were the first to feel the assault of this spiteful ice, and he could feel the pulsing of his blood slow down as if it were about to freeze. Hansen was frightened, and he abandoned his sword to fall back. Unfortunately, his fingers remained numb, and they did not obey his wishes. It was like they did not belong to him. It was fortunate that he had learnt ice skin. Making use of it, the feel of his fingers returned and the fright of frostbite diminished. What's going on? Zui Quang has only learnt the first tier of ice skin, but that is what I have learnt as well. How has he managed to open his first gene lock and unleash such power while I cannot? Hansen and his snow lady then combined into one. His heart was beating like mad, and his kidneys were in hyperdrive for the formulation of energy. His legs had received an incredible boost to their speed, and Hansen managed to bob and weave his way past every incoming fist. That day in the exchange event, Hansen heard that a talented evolver could unlock their first gene lock before they became a surpasser. Because they lacked the correct fitness level required to fully unlock it, people like that were practically indestructible. Hansen used all of his power to run his ice skin skill, and it was only enough to repel the invasion of the frosty air that sought to consume him. He did not dare touch Zui Quang's actual body because his ice powers were simply too strong. The talent that I stole really isn't that reliable. It's the same first-tier ice skin, but there is such a big difference. What could have gone wrong? Han Sen thought to himself. When he learned ice skin, he did not use a Geno solution. Unless the ice skin Zhu Longyan possessed was fake, what other explanation could there be for it being so weak? Han Sen continued to dodge, falling back as he did. Zui Quang was too fast, though, and he did not dare let Han Sen slip away from the battleground he had established. He was putting him in a very dangerous situation. But in the midst of all this, Han Sen noticed something quite strange. The frosty air that was bursting out of Zui Quang was being doused by Han Sen's ice skin. He didn't think much of it at first, but after a while, he started to feel that the power he had been suppressing was now inside him. It coursed through his entire body, empowering him. The absorbed frost gathered up in greater and greater amounts, but it did not hurt Han Sen. It mixed with his insides, becoming a part of him. Does this mean I can absorb Zui Quang's frosted air? Han Sen thought to himself happily. With this absorption of ice power, his ice skin seemed different. Han Sen could not put his finger on it exactly, but his body did not seem to be bothered by the plumes of frost Zui Quang continuously emitted. Han Sen was wearing his blood scale armor. He threw his own fist to collide with Zui Quang's. He was unsatisfied with the absorption of the atmospheric ice power, and thought the amount he had consumed was not enough. He wanted to see if he could absorb the power right from the source, Zui Quang himself. When the fists connected, however, he felt an overwhelming stock of ice power absorb into his body. Within seconds, his arms, half his body and his entire blood flow became frozen. His exterior was quickly encased in ice, removing his ability to fight or even move. Go die. Zui Quang's eyes burst with a flame of hatred, painting Han Sen with the color of murder. One last fist sought to drill itself into Han Sen's body. The silver fox on Han Sen's shoulder finally moved. Like a silver thunderbolt, it leaped towards his master's enemy and tore into Zui Quang's fist with its talon. With a flash of lightning, the ice that surrounded his fist was shattered, and his entire body was sent flying away. Electricity consumed Zui Quang, and when he hit the ground, his body was adorned with wretched scorch marks. His hand that suffered the dig of the talons had been blown to gory bits and pieces, revealing the bone of his arm. Zui Quang looked at the silver fox with utter surprise. He was shocked. The silver fox howled madly, and like an illuminated shadow, it jumped on top of Zui Quang. Zui Quang flailed his arms madly to try to stop the attacking fox, but they did nothing. His chest was torn open with a collection of scratch marks, and blood started gushing like a fountain. The terrifying power of the thunderous fox had shattered every last bit of ice that dressed Zui Quang. The silver fox seemed to be really mad, and it angrily circled Zui Quang like a silver shadow. Thunder and lightning cracked the sky as it observed its master's opponent. Zui Quang, who was so strong, was utterly defenseless under the paws of the silver fox. Once more, the silver fox pounced to pierce its talons into Zui Quang's body, drawing rivers of blood. His body was now a collection of bloody ravines and black, scorch marks. Zui Quang was terrified, repeatedly screaming in fear. The ice power inside him resumed its activity, but without the strength to bear it, he became encased in an icy sarcophagus of his own making. The silver fox had firmly proven the abhorrent power that resided within it, and there was nothing Zui Quang could do to revert the tides of this fight. Zui Quang, who had opened the first gene lock, lacked any remote chance of resisting the attacks of the silver fox. All he could do was watch himself get electrified. Pang! A silver lightning bolt struck Zui Quang's chest. His body was now like charcoal, and he fizzed and crackled with residual electricity. His body convulsed and twisted madly with no refrain. It looked as if he couldn't breathe, and whatever gasps he could manage were going to be amongst his last. The silver fox turned into a silver shadow one last time and bolted over to Zui Quang again. Zui Quang could not even finish his scream before a mighty flash froze him like a black, charcoal statue. As a stiff wind blew, what was once the body of Zui Quang succumbed to a gust and drifted away as nothing more than dust and echoes. So, Zui Quang died just like that. Han Sen opened his eyes widely, trying to observe the traces of black dust floating upon the breeze. He had been so used to seeing the silver fox tame, calm, and harmless that he had almost forgotten that it was a fierce super creature. Seeing it become something so scary and violent was quite shocking. He then returned his thoughts to the current state of his body, which was still mostly encased in ice. The blood inside was little more than ice as well. If he couldn't defrost himself soon, he would perish. Han Sen slowly turned back on his ice skin, and he felt the ice that covered him start to thaw. It gradually turned into a frosted air that swirled its way into his body. The silver fox quietly sat on the snow beside Hansen. It did not even blink as it observed the ice seep back into the ground as water. The icy air that swirled in and around him started to be expelled, returning to the atmosphere without form. His ice skin became crystal, and his flesh and bones turned transparent. As time passed, the amount of power Hansen expelled got heavier and heavier. The transparency of his flesh and bones increased, and you could now see his veins. As more and more time elapsed, the chilled air within Hansen was becoming stronger and stronger. His cells were moving, but it felt as if they were turning into crystals. At the same time, the Dongsu Sutra started running, and a strange feeling compelled Hansen to stop his practice of ice skin. Hansen's face looked ghastly. He was excited to try to combine the frost air with his own cells and unlock his first gene lock. But not after he started the Dongsu Sutra. Could it be that these two skills contradict each other? Hansen was a little annoyed. If these two skills could not coexist together, it ran the possibility of them frying his mind and turning him crazy. The silver fox watched Hansen wake up, and when he did, it ran towards his legs to rub against them. His foul mood made him push the silver fox away in irritation. Seeing the silver fox's pitiable face, Hansen's heart was given a shock. He pulled out a small mirror that had been prepared for Beetle Night. Looking at himself in the reflection, he did not notice anything strange. When Hansen cast Ice Skin, he felt the chill rise. Although it wasn't as scary as Zui Quang's, it still made some water turn into ice. If this was normal, Hansen would be glad. But when he looked at himself in the mirror again, he saw cold sweat dotting his forehead. He could clearly see in the mirror how his eyes were starting to turn a faint shade of red. While it wasn't stark and obvious to see, a good look would reveal the encroaching color. Hansen thought that his eyes were starting to look like those of the Zhu family, cold, callous, and cruel. Oh my days, what the hell is this skill? This is not right. Normally, I would never kick Silver Fox away, and I wouldn't be so moody. Can that crappy ice skin really change someone's personality? The more Hansen thought about it, the more annoyed he got. He thought about breaking the mirror, and he started to fear something had truly gone wrong with him. He immediately cancelled his training of ice skin and cast the Dongsu Sutra. He retreated into a state of meditation, which woke up his cells and generated a sweet, pleasing fragrance. The frosty air was chased out by the pleasant smell, out and away from his cells. This generated a white fog around Hansen. He was a beginner of the Dongsu Sutra and he had yet to complete the first tier. It could not rival ice skin, and that was proven with the entire hour it took to expunge the frosty power that had gathered inside his body. Hansen continued to sit on the snow, and he repeatedly cast Dongsu Sutra. The silver fox was sitting down near Hansen as well, surveying the area with serious vigilance. He didn't move an inch. The sky became clogged with dreary clouds, and a blizzard began to form all around. Hansen was soon buried in the snow, and it wasn't long until he represented the image of a snowman. The body of the silver fox supported no snow, however. It just maintained its position, awaiting its master's next move. It snowed all day and all night and still, neither Hansen nor the silver fox moved. The snow on Hansen turned to ice, releasing frosted air beneath the sun. "Whoa, that is a beautiful little fox." Not too far from them, the voice of a woman sounded. "Liu King, don't be fooled by its appearance. No matter how cute a creature may look, it is most likely a cruel and despicable monster on the inside." A man and woman trudged through the field of snow, inching closer and closer in the direction of the silver fox. The woman noticed the silver fox didn't move a single inch, and it continued to just sit there. Next to it was a snowman. With unexpected surprise, she said, "Oh, and there is a snowman." The little fox keeps looking at it. "Do you think maybe that it built the snowman? Your imagination knows no bounds. Tell me, how might a fox build a snowman? Obviously, that has to be the creation of someone else here. But I will admit that it is a bit strange. Why would the fox just sit there and not move?" The man was becoming more curious as well. "Let me go check it out. Perhaps it is frozen." The woman secretly wanted to touch the fox. The man quickly pulled her back, saying, "Careful. That thing could be luring us closer, for all we know. It could be a trap. We should just run up there and smack it with our swords. Problem solved, danger averted." After this, he summoned a beast soul sword and started running towards the silver fox, waving the sword as he went. When the man brought his sword down to strike his target, he hit nothing. The snowman next to the silver fox moved. An icy hand reached out, using its middle finger and index finger to stop the fall of the blade. The only noise that sounded was a quick catcha, and the blade of the beast soul sword was cleanly cut in two by those two fingers. The man and woman were shocked, and so they quickly retreated. Then, they saw the snowman begin to crumble. A human shadow emerged, grabbed the fox, and ran off. Within 2 seconds, they had completely disappeared. "It's a fox fairy," the woman screamed. "What fox fairy?" "That was just a humanoid creature," the man said, with his face depleted of color. They hadn't seen Hansen's face clearly, only the shape and shadow of a man grabbing the fox and running off. Yeah, a fox fairy that shapeshifted into a human. The woman could not escape her belief of it being a fox fairy. Regardless, the man and woman did not believe what they had seen was a human. But who could blame them? Why would any man be buried under snowfall and remain like a snowman, only to emerge, grab a fox, and quickly sprint away without leaving a single footprint? This is strange. There must be something wrong. The Zhu family's ice skin must have some sort of problem. This made Hansen remember the speech Zhu Yang gave at the exchange event, which pertained to another skill called Ice Heart. It was a kaigong that was supposed to calm your emotions and put them to rest. People said that everyone in the Zhu family had learnt Ice Heart. But every Zhu family member Hansen had met possessed an angry personality, and this made him think that this Ice Heart had a problem. Hansen was still unsure whether or not his ice skin had issues. Regardless, he decided not to continue practicing it and put it aside. Instead, he moved his focus onto training with the Dongsu Sutra. Hansen wanted to learn the first tier of the Dongsu Sutra sooner now, so he could unlock his first gene lock. "Brother Han, are you free today? Could you teach me how to fight?" Hansen had just returned to the Black God shelter, and already Kai Ziyuan was fretting for his attention. "I don't have the time. I have had deeds of greater importance on my mind recently," Hansen responded. "Brother Han, what big things are you looking to do?" Kai Ziyuan's eyes possessed a strange look as he questioned Hansen. "It'll be a cooperative task with the Starwheel Shelter and Philip, in which we will take down the Royal Shelter," Hansen casually answered. "Brother Han really is a person who does big things. I would like to help, though. I can aid you when the time comes to take on this royal shelter you speak of," Kai Ziyuan excitedly said. "If you have the heart, I will provide you with the task of enlisting the aid of the Starwheel Shelter and Philip Shelter." Hansen smiled and looked at Kai Ziyuan fondly. "I will not disappoint you." Hansen decided to visit the training room to work on his dual skill while he was still feeling good. Then, he went on Skynet and entered the official battlegrounds. It had been a while since he last logged on, and this time, no one was sending him invites requesting a duel. It looked as if people had given up on him, which made sense, since it had been several months since he last came online. Hansen decided to matchmake, and he was quickly introduced to an opponent. When that person saw Hansen's ID, he was extremely happy. The first thing he did was send a group message to his friends, telling them, "Guys, I matched with Murderer Coin." Many people entered the lobby to watch. After seeing Hansen's ID, they were all super excited, and everyone kept extending invites to their own friends. "Guys, come look. Coin is back. Coin is getting ready to battle. Quick." Word quickly spread, and the venue was packed to the brim with people. Hansen had hoped to have a quiet duel, seeing as it had been so long. But after randomly matchmaking, a rabid audience had turned out in droves before the countdown had even finished. When the countdown was over, Hansen and his opponent entered the arena. The man who was to fight Hansen said, "Coin, although I am fond of your battle style, I won't go easy on you. I will do my best to beat you, in a showing of the respect I have for you." "Good." Hansen had no prepared response. This was only going to be a virtual battle. Did things have to be so prim and proper? Did things have to be so wild? After the man said this, he went to punch Hansen. The fists came at him thick and fast, with a fair amount of power packed into each. Light thrust punch. Not bad. Hansen was quick to move and dodge the attack, of course. Light thrust punch was the weaker variant of medium thrust punch. Due to its lesser power, it was quicker, but it wasn't as fast as spike jab. When performed correctly, light thrust punch could be cast consecutively, locking an opponent into a position where they could only defend and not attack. "Haha, I got you good." That wasn't light thrust punch, it was mechanical fist. After this, the person's whole body began to move. All of a sudden, his body transformed into a lethal weapon. His fists, legs, back, elbows, but feet and knees became horrible weapons, attacking Hansen simultaneously without reprieve. Hansen was surprised, not expecting to come across another elite who knew how to use mechanical fist. Although it was the most popular fist skill, it was incredibly difficult to learn and even harder to master. You needed a very high amount of fitness and practice points to use it, so the number of people that were able to take advantage of the skill was quite low. Mechanical fist was all about turning your body into some sort of a machine, using every part of your composition to fight. Han Sen had once seen a video of an elite who was exceptional at using mechanical fist, and could use only his hair to take out an opponent of the same rank. It was a weird thing to see. Earlier, Han Sen saw that his opponent's ID was Dancer. He thought he was going to use rather big, open skills to fight. He did not expect him to use strange and delicate skills. Dancer's body showed no restraint as he continued to attack. This strong move outperformed every other fist skill there was, too. When the fist moved, the elbow moved. When the elbow moved, the shoulder moved. When the shoulder moved, the body moved. When the Dancer got in range of Han Sen, he could keep attacking. Although the attacks looked strange, they were performed with incredible finesse. With this creepy, raging attack, Han Sen could only fall back and dodge Dancer's assault. Tang Zhenliu managed to secure a seat in the audience and watched the fight carefully. His mechanical fist is fairly remarkable. He could be at an expert level of close-distance fighting. Very well done. Lin Feng, who was also there watching, said, "Is it really that powerful?" Tang Zhenliu inquired inquisitively. "Well, it's okay. It can indeed be quite troubling if it gets close to you." Lin Feng smiled and said, "If you say it can be troubling at such a close distance, then it must be powerful. I wonder how Dollar will get out of this predicament. Surely, he cannot just keep dodging like that." It wasn't only Lin Feng and Tang Zhenliu who had come to watch, but many others had arrived there in droves to watch the fight. Yi Dongmu was in the alliance currently, and hearing about the fight with Dollar, made sure to come and watch. He was sitting in the stands and didn't blink once as he watched the battle unfold. Cayenne Hejin and a few people from the Ares Martial Hall had also come to watch the fight, because people were whispering that Dollar was going to make use of Heavenly Go. Heavenly Go was a secret skill of the Ares Martial Hall. Very few trainees of the Ares Martial Hall would ever learn that skill, so it was only natural for them to desire to see it in action. Cayenne Hejin invited the queen to come and watch, but she lacked interest in such events and declined the invitation. Ever since Kill Dollar last fought in the arena, a lot of people had come to believe that he was a member of the Ares Martial Hall. After all, if he wasn't, how did he come to possess the skill Heavenly Go? Dancer's flurry of attacks were still coming on strong. In the beginning, people were shocked by the ferocity of his raging assault, but slowly, they came to realize that Dancer did not have as much of an advantage as they initially thought. Bit by bit, Dancer was being pushed into a corner. How could this happen? Dollar was only dodging. How come it is Dancer who has been pushed into a corner? Dollar is Dollar. Even without attacking, he can reign supreme. He is too damn strong. This is amazing. The ordinary folk were shocked by how powerful Dollar was, but the elites had a strange look upon them. Damn, just who is this guy? Cayenne Hejin was looking frustrated. He suspected that Dollar was doing this to deliberately throw mud at the Ares Martial Hall. Dancer was feeling terrible inside. He had been attacking all this time, and yet he was unable to land a single punch or even brush his clothing. It wasn't just that. Either Dancer had come to realize that the space in which he could move around was getting smaller and smaller. The powerful attacks he had were getting harder to perform as a result. Intimidation. Dancer was feeling intimidated. Although the opponent did not attack, the way he was dodging was forcing Dancer to alter his position. This made him think a lot more. No, if I keep attacking here, all he has to do is reach out his hand. Dancer was getting scared. The way the opponent moved was quite threatening, and this was his weak point. Dollar was forcing him to change his skill. The people who were watching could observe this strange scene. Pang. In the end, Dancer had nowhere else to go and his back was now against the wall of the arena. He no longer cared much to attack. Pang. Dollar threw a punch to attack Dancer's weak spot, killing him outright. That was too strong. He killed him in a punch. Dollar really is Dollar. The Dollar is real. The level gap was too far. They were nowhere close to each other. People were discussing what had just happened. Many hopped into matchmaking in the hopes of being the next to go against Dollar. Try it. See if you can match with him. Tang Zhenliu also jumped into matchmaking. Yi Dongmu did not hesitate to matchmake. Cayenne Hejin and the people from the Ares Martial Hall were of the same mind, as well. Han Sen did indeed decide to have another fight, thinking there was no point in leaving without warming up. Yi Dongmu. Tang Zhenliu saw who had been selected to go against Dollar and was flabbergasted. He then laughed and said, "They really are inseparable. So many people are matchmaking at the same time, but look who ends up being the one to fight him next. They really are meant to fight each other. This is going to be fun." I wonder how much progress Yi Dongmu has made in the past few years. It wasn't just Tang Zhenliu who recognized Yi Dongmu. Many others did so too. With wide eyes and mouths agape, no one expected that after all these years, Yi Dongmu went up against Dollar again. People who had seen their last fight were extremely excited, and they started screaming in anticipation. Those who didn't know about it asked around, and when they heard of what had transpired, became just as feverish. Fang Mingquan, who heard the news and quickly came to see, was streaming this fight. His whole body became excited at the prospect of those two fighting once again. God, what am I seeing? Idongmu. It's Idongmu. After all these years, could this fight prove to be Idongmu's much-desired revenge? Idongmu did not use the face blur function, and his cold and proud face was on display for all to see. He is so handsome. This is like a scene from Hamlet. I hope Idongmu can finally exact his revenge. A woman watched Idongmu, her face blushing red. Yeah, he's too handsome. Idongmu has to win this fight. Idongmu is like the man from my dreams. Before he gets his revenge, I want him to make a baby with me. Move aside, you slut. Big brother, he is mine. The women, keen to gauge men on their appearances alone, were practically salivating over Idongmu. As they all drooled, they looked ready to eat the man alive. Such comments made the single men angry, and so they rallied all their support behind Dollar. You women don't know anything. Who cares about appearance? True worth is in power and muscle. Dollar once killed Idongmu with a single strike. Today will just be a repeat. Yeah, you all take a good look at Dollar. This is what an elite should look like, dressed in black, nothing fanciful. This is what a real man looks like. If you want to be a man, look like Dollar. Don't try and be some pretty boy like he. Our Dollar is indestructible and cannot be spent. He will end Idongmu in a single blow. Dollar, let me be the one to make babies for you. Han Sen listened in on the comments during the countdown and felt as if something was wrong. Why were all the pretty girls supporting Idongmu, and the only ones supporting him were big, rough men? A few men sat in seductive positions, chanting their desire to produce babies for Han Sen, which made his skin crawl. Fang Mingquan was chief commentator on live stream, stating, "It would appear no one has forgotten that glorious fight. The young men who watched that event back in the day are the primary evolvers of today. That fight went down in history as a paramount event of the battleground, and it is not something that will ever be forgotten. Although I personally place my bets on and support the almighty Dollar, I would like to see Idongmu achieve more this time, and not end up wallowing like a sad prince through a second defeat. Brother Quan, this is not right. If you are a fan of Dollar, how can you say something in support of Idongmu?" Someone commented, "It is because, there are too many women supporting Idongmu. If I don't maintain some impartiality, his lady fans might all turn on me. I don't want to be single forever." Fang Mingquan had opened both of his hands innocently as he scrambled for a response. Haha. When the countdown was over, Idongmu and Han Sen entered the arena. Idongmu did not rush to strike. He just stood there, staring at Han Sen without a word. And that's what they both did. They just stood and watched each other. As people observed the confrontation, they did so with bated breath. Idongmu broke the long silence. "If I win, tell me who you are." His simple request impacted the audience. People had been guessing Dollar's identity for what seemed like forever, yet no one had come close. His identity was something everyone wanted to know. During the peak of Dollar's popularity, experts analyzed every aspect of the enigmatic character to try and determine his real identity. But again, no one had been able to find out. After Idongmu said this, the crowd's focus turned to Han Sen. They all hoped he would oblige Idongmu's request. "Okay." Han Sen said this single word, and the audience exploded with countless screams, like a boiling kettle. "Idongmu, I support you. Kill Dollar. Take him down. Take him down. Take him down." Han Sen then continued, "But I have a counter-proposal, one for if I am the victor." Han Sen was confident in his abilities and didn't think he could lose. He knew Idongmu too well, whereas his opponent didn't. It was almost impossible for Han Sen to lose. "Okay, tell me." Idongmu's face remained motionless as he continued to simply stare at Han Sen. If one didn't know any better, it would be possible to believe Han Sen was the love of his life. "If you lose, this will be our final fight," Han Sen said. Idongmu did not know Han Sen was Dollar, and yet they had grown to be good friends. Still, he kept searching for Han Sen to be his training partner. But now that Han Sen was back to being Dollar, the accidental deceit made him feel a bit guilty. That is why Han Sen made this proposal, so he could avoid having to fight him as Dollar once more. "Okay." Idongmu's eyes remained fixated on Han Sen, as they had for a long time. After Idongmu said okay, the audience was excited, but they were just as nervous. If Idongmu lost this time, then the years-long battle between these two enemies would never repeat. The women who were supporting Idongmu did not say a word, as their nerves were racked. And then, they watched Idongmu slowly unsheath his daggers. "Do you think Idongmu agreed too quickly?" Tang Zhenliu was quite surprised. Lin Feng calmly said, Idongmu had no choice but to agree. Why? Tang Zhenliu did not understand and looked at Lin Feng for clarification. Idongmu has learned an assassin's skill. The principles of an assassin hinge on the dedication to move forward and never go back. Make it or break it, their fealty to this pledge can never change. If he did not agree, then it would reveal doubt. Without absolute confidence in your abilities, the principles of the assassin are broken. If that happened, defeat would be guaranteed. This is why Yi Dongmu had to agree. And now, he will use every ounce of his power in his attempt to take down Dollar, Lin Feng explained. That is why. Dollar is quite manipulative, then. Tang Zhenliu had only just realized this. As they spoke, the fight began. Mr. Long, what are your thoughts concerning this fight? Fang Mingquan, the commentator, had with him a very famous evolver as a guest on the broadcasts. This Mr. Long was known to any person who frequented the official evolver's platform. He was over 100 years old and had made countless instructional videos to help out fresh evolvers, teaching them how to perform skills and hunt creatures. I haven't studied Yi Dongmu much, but Dollar I have researched extensively and analyzed his battle tapes. At this time, Yi Dongmu made a move towards Han Sen. Mr. Long, who was watching Yi Dongmu's casual demeanor as he strolled, expressed absolute surprise. In his reaction, he blurted out, Mr. Long, what is going on? Although Fang Mingquan was a professional commentator, he didn't know much about fighting skills. It was because of this that he did not notice anything special. Mr. Long said with admiration in his voice, if I am not mistaken, Yi Dongmu is using sacrifice. My knowledge of fighting skills is limited, so I'm not entirely sure what sacrifice is. Could you provide me and the audience an explanation of why sacrifice is so spectacular? To use sacrifice, you must throw away all the other thoughts that might occupy your mind. You need to be without fear, without worry, without sorrow, and without happiness. Your mind must devote itself to one singular purpose. If you do this, then you can achieve mastery of sacrifice, and it will aid you. Every step he takes will accelerate his momentum and increase the power he can achieve. The more steps he takes, the more power and momentum he can use. If he reaches 100 steps, then his power and momentum will max out. If that were to occur, I don't think there is anyone out there who could stop such an attack. Is it really that powerful? If Yi Dongmu takes 100 steps, then Dollar will lose. When Fang Mingquan heard this, he was shocked. I think what Mr. Long says makes sense. Look at Yi Dongmu's momentum. It's getting stronger and stronger. Even right now, my heart trembles. Is sacrifice really that powerful? Oh no. Dollar doesn't know Yi Dongmu is using sacrifice. He should strike now, before he gathers too much momentum. Mr. Long shook his head and said, it is easier for someone to make up his mind to die for a noble purpose than to actually go through the execution of such sacrifice. Sacrifice still needs its user to maintain his focus for the entire duration of the cast. The longer he walks, the greater the chance his faith and focus might change. If his resolve quivers by only just a bit, his momentum will decrease. It is very much like war. First, there is much momentum, but when the horrors of battle rear their ugly faces, it's gone before you know it. The highest sacrifice I have seen was 100 steps. Even if he kept on walking after this, his momentum would still decrease. I wonder how many steps Yi Dongmu will be able to take with his usage of sacrifice. Fang Mingquan was watching Yi Dongmu intently. After Mr. Long's explanation, viewers of the stream started counting Yi Dongmu's steps. 10 steps, 20 steps, 30 steps. Everyone could calculate that the distance between Yi Dongmu and Han Sen was about 50 steps. If Han Sen still did not strike, then Yi Dongmu would be right in front of him in about 50 more steps. Yi Dongmu had only walked 30 steps, yet his momentum had already risen a great deal. It was as if he had been possessed by a god. With every step, his momentum increased. The momentum in his body was illuminating him with some form of angelic light, and it frightened those who were watching. He's going to strike. Everyone had stopped breathing, and they observed Yi Dongmu without any idea what his attack was going to be like. When the distance between the two fighters had reached a mere 2 steps, Han Sen finally moved. But he didn't go forward, instead, he went back. He fell back like a rowboat that had been rocked away by a tumultuous sea. Han Sen refaced Yi Dongmu with a calm look, in stark contrast to the fiery appearance of Yi Dongmu. Now, they were only 1 step away from each other. Beautiful. Dollar is a smart guy, he made the right choice. Mr. Long complimented Han Sen's action. Mr. Long thinks Dollar did a good thing. Fang Mingquan looked at Mr. Long with a confused expression. Yes, it was a clever retreat. Mr. Long looked excited as he continued. Earlier, I said what was most important about sacrifice was the momentum. If you reach max capacity, you will only get worse and worse. Yi Dongmu has already walked 53 steps, and he has already gathered a lot of power and momentum. If Dollar chooses to fight back with him right now, it'd be a bad decision. When he fell back just now, it opened up a great set of possibilities and opportunities. If he keeps avoiding Idongmu up until sacrifice weakens, that would be the time for him to strike. It is a beautiful response, one that proves how smart and wise a fighter he is. After hearing Mr. Long's profound analysis, everyone watching understood. This means Idongmu will have to catch up with Dollar before his momentum decreases, otherwise, it will be difficult to win. The strongest person I have ever seen only managed to walk 100 steps. If Idongmu can catch up with Dollar with 100 momentum building steps, the power unleashed from a hit of that force may be unavoidable. That would utterly wreck and annihilate Dollar. However, if he cannot catch up by the time he hits 100, there is a 90% chance Dollar will have already won. Everyone was intently focused on these two characters, who were chasing each other around the arena. 60, 70, 80. Everyone quietly counted each step to themselves. Every step was like a jump scare, frightening their hearts. Through the power of his momentum and strength, Idongmu's speed became frightening. And he was only continuing to get faster. Can Idongmu really catch up with Dollar before he reaches his 100th step? 85, 90, 95, 100. Han-sen turned around and started walking, but Idongmu did not catch up. After taking his 100th step, everyone's heart sighed. Idongmu was brimming with insane power, but Dollar's strategy had worked. He had made it too hard for Idongmu to use his true strength. After 100 steps, everyone feared Idongmu's momentum would fall into insignificance, and he'd be unable to catch up with Dollar at all. Although people thought Dollar was going to win, Dollar's fans were a little disappointed. This form of winning lacked the certain spice they had come to expect, and it lacked excitement. But people then realized that after 100 steps, Idongmu's momentum did not weaken. Instead, it was continuing to increase by a scary amount. He was like a god, and he came at Han-sen with greater ferocity. 110, 115, 120. Oh my days. It is too powerful. It is too powerful. A 120-step sacrifice. And this insane momentum continues to grow. Idongmu's approach towards Han-sen was crazy, and everyone's heart leapt with each step taken. A feverish excitement had grabbed a hold of their hearts, as if it tugged them to run alongside Idongmu together. Boom. 150. Idongmu's body cracked the air in two, sounding thunder. His hair trailed in the wind of his pursuit, hunting after Han-sen like some mad god of lightning. His body had reached maximum capacity, and it seemed as if it would even be able to tear the space by a single strike. And it was at this moment that Han-sen stopped. He was moving incredibly quickly, but when he stopped all of a sudden, he became a mountain, allowing the waves to shatter against his body. After all these steps, Idongmu's momentum had reached its maximum. Kill. In this final step, Idongmu no longer resembled a human being. Following his raging sprint, with his long mane of hair riding the violent winds of his passing, the daggers in his hands moved. In this moment, everyone understood Dollar wasn't falling back. He did not fear his opponent, and he wasn't employing the strategy Mr. Long had been talking about. All this time he had just been waiting for Idongmu to reach his prime and unleash his most powerful attack. The audience that were in their seats couldn't help but stand up and lean forward with their mouths open to watch Idongmu perform his final strike. Idongmu's momentum and power had reached maximum capacity, and now the daggers in his hands finally moved. They traveled at an unimaginable speed, quicker than the wind. You cannot touch the wind, nor can you see it. The beginning and then end of that strike was untraceable. Although everyone knew Idongmu was going to strike, when he actually did it, people thought their eyes were playing tricks, as the strike launched out of nowhere. Its speed was so great, people could not follow the blade in its driving hand, but a collective gasp of shock was still given by the entire audience. Following that tantalizing moment, chills ran down their spines and their faces were drawn of their color. It was as if the spectators themselves each suffered the same strike. Everyone was eager for the result. The scary power of a 150-step sacrifice had built up within a soul man, and it had been delivered to a single opponent through a blade. They did not know how Han-sen could survive it. Han-sen's hand did not possess a weapon, and in this terrifying moment, he placed the palms of his hands together like a praying Buddha. His eyes did not even look at the knife come his way, and still he looked so calm and so chill. It was in fascinating contrast to Idongmu's raging, intimidating aura. The people who watched it felt really bad. Dong. The extreme attack by Idongmu, the final strike of sacrifice and the blade of its deliverance, found itself caught and wedged between Han-sen's palms. It was at that moment the storm stopped and the air became gentle. The excitement that had built up was now empty. Silence robbed the room of its life, and it was as if time stood still. The brutal attack had been stopped by a man's bare hands. Everyone's mouth dropped. They scoured the canvas of that scene in absolute shock. No one was able to believe or accept that the strike that had received so much build-up was now over. It was like a truck going over 200 miles per hour being brought to an instant stop without any prior sign. The audience felt strange, and they could hardly accept what their eyes told them. Even if a vehicle was going at 200 miles per hour, slowing down to stop would take some noticeable time. And even if such a truck had smashed into a wall, considerable damage would be dealt to both objects. But nothing happened here. Everything just came to an instant stop. Han Sen moved his hand to grab the dagger. He returned it to Yi Dongmu and said, "I accept the passion behind this strike. This life, this world, this sky, this earth, this single strike." Yi Dongmu's body was shaking. He took the dagger and turned a complicated look on Han Sen. The battle did not continue. Han Sen quit the virtual platform. Yi Dongmu and Dollar left, and although the fighters had not determined who was the victor and who was the loser, everyone knew it in their hearts. Fang Minquan gave a long sigh. Feeling sorry, he said, "This attack determines life and death, but for now, they are strangers. One battle fought by two legends. This is something that we will never witness again." Hearing Fang Minquan say this, everyone's mood turned a bit dim. Because Dollar and Yi Dongmu made their arrangement, they would never fight again. This was their final match. Almost everyone who watched this fight rewatched it a number of times. But no matter how many times they watched it, they were parched and thirsty for more. They watched it again and again, unable to stop. What happened to Yi Dongmu is a shame. The passion behind this strike, I want to see it again. I have to see it again. Poor prince, I am willing to give up 10 years of my life for the opportunity to watch those two fight again. I accept the passion behind this strike. I am going to cry. Dollar was too cruel and he robbed Yi Dongmu of his soul. After Fang Minquan returned to his office, he sorted out the video recording of the battle. It did not need editing. It only needed a title and an article to go alongside it. But this article was not for Dollar, it was for Yi Dongmu. Assassin King. This life and this world never end. This sky, this earth, and this single strike. To see the cruel reign all these years, only Yi Dongmu's passion was the most touching. This is for my favorite assassin King Yi Dongmu. For the result of this fight, few people mentioned Dollar. Most of the talk was directed to Yi Dongmu. Even though he didn't win, the passion behind that strike touched the hearts of all who had seen it. It led to him being given the title Assassin King. But as for Dollar, he was already an unbeatable deity, and people no longer had any interest in talking about him anymore. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.